Today we're going to be taking a look at the HTVRONT Auto Heat Press 2. Now, I have their first one sitting right here behind me, and this is my go-to heat press. I absolutely love HTVRONT's Auto Press. I use it all the time, so I can't wait to show you the new upgrades that they made to their Auto Press 2. We're going to talk all about it today. We're going to test out some fun Christmas projects together, and we'll learn about some of these new features. So if you're in the market for a new heat press, you're going to want to watch this video. If we're just meeting right now, hi, my name is Nisha. Welcome to Little Craft Nest. The HTVRONT Auto Heat Press 2 comes with a manual and also a large Teflon sheet, which is always nice to have. The heat press weighs 43 pounds, which makes it a very sturdy machine, but it just may be a little tricky trying to get it out of the box. The only setup you have to do for this machine is plug it in, and then you can set your time, your temperature, and even your pressure. But we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later. I love that this heat press has a large adjustable LCD screen. It is an upgrade from their last machine, and it's just a little added bonus. All the buttons are displayed right on top of the machine, but if you're not sure which one is which, there is a sticker below it identifying each of the buttons. There's also a great breakdown of each of the settings in the manual. This heat press has 4 preset modes, which are all listed in the manual. You may or may not want to use those, but you can also make 4 of your own custom settings. So I would suggest setting those up for the materials you use most. So you could do one for regular heat transfer vinyl, you could do one for glitter vinyl, you could do one for sublimation, and maybe printable heat transfer vinyl. So those are totally up to you. But you can also manually set the press every time you use it. So if you're using a material that you don't often use, you can set it for the time, temperature, and pressure that you want. Now, the biggest difference between the Auto Heat Press 1 and 2 is that the Auto Heat Press 2 has adjustable pressure, which I think is amazing. I think that's the only thing I didn't love when I was reviewing this machine, but with this new machine, you can definitely adjust the pressure. So you can adjust it between 50 and 170 pounds. Now, when you're looking at the presets in the manual, they seem to have all the presets set at 170 pounds. So I'm guessing that's what you would use most often. I will have to do a little more pressure testing to see if you can get away with using less pressure versus more pressure on some projects. And I'm sure it would vary for the different substrates you use as well. Now, this new heat press has a bigger gap between the heat plate and the ironing mat. So you're going to be able to put thicker substrates on your press, which is wonderful. So for my very first project with this heat press, I decided to make a Christmas pillow. So I set my temperature for 305 degrees Fahrenheit, my time for 15 seconds, and my pressure for 170 pounds, because that's what they seem to use most often in the manual. This heat press also heats up 10 times faster, which is an added bonus, so you're not waiting forever for your machine to warm up. I first used a lint roller on the pillowcase, and then I pre-pressed it to get any moisture and wrinkles out of the material before I put my design down. Using the heat press is very similar to the first auto press. You just simply open the drawer, and then you can put your substrate down, close the drawer, press the start button, and your machine will automatically lower and start the countdown. Now, one feature I love is that if suddenly you decided, oh, I don't want to press this quite yet, you can hit any button on your machine and your heat press will open up again. So I love that safety feature that you can quickly reset and potentially save your project. But it's also good for when you're doing pre-presses. You probably don't always want to do long presses, and you may not want to program a short countdown. So to be able to just close the press and then hit any button and have it open is wonderful. The design I cut out for this project is 14.3 inches in length. So luckily the heat plate on this is 15 inches. So I was able to just get my design perfectly on the heat pad, and I was able to press this whole design at once rather than having to do 2 separate presses. This press also has an auto feature. So there's a button on the screen where you can press and it'll turn the auto function on, which means when you close the drawer, your heat press is gonna automatically lower and start the countdown without you having to press the start button. Now, personally, that's not a function I would use a whole lot. I like being able to have control and press that start button and see that come down. But if you were doing a whole pile of projects at once, you were doing some batching, maybe you had like 20 shirts you wanted to do, this would come in handy. So it will save you a few seconds just by putting your substrate and your design on your substrate, pushing that tray in, and your heat press plate will automatically lower without having to press the start button. So that may be something you want or don't want, but it's really nice to have that option. I absolutely love how this pillow turned out, and I've got one project tackled for the holidays. For the next project, I decided to do a layer design on a baby shirt. So I layered regular heat transfer vinyl with glitter heat transfer vinyl, and this is where that press any button feature and it opens really helps out, because when you're doing layered projects, you don't want to do a full press for every single layer, because then your vinyl's getting way too much heat and it'll probably wrinkle up on you. So you usually want to do half presses, but you may not want to have a preset half press setting on your machine. So for this, I would put my heat transfer vinyl on the shirt, close up the machine, and not let it do the full countdown. I would just press a random button after 5 or 6 seconds, open up the tray, and then put my next layer down. Now for the final layer, I did do a full press with a Teflon sheet on top so that my vinyl didn't stick to the top of my press. It's always good to use a Teflon sheet, especially when you're doing layers and your whole design isn't covered by the transfer or carrying sheet. You want to make sure all that vinyl is covered and not touching the heat plate when you press. If you want to learn more about layering heat transfer vinyl, I do have a full in-depth video on that you can go check out after this video, and I'll leave that listed down in the description. I just love how this baby shirt turned out, and it will be perfect for the holidays for my little nephew. I also wanted to test out the HTVRONT Auto Press 2 with sublimation, but instead of sublimating on a thin substrate, I decided to do thick ceramic coasters to see how this turned out. For this project, I set my heat press to 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 200 seconds, and because I was using a thicker substrate, I decided to lower the pressure to 90 pounds. I wasn't sure how these settings would work, as this was the first time I was pressing on these coasters and also the first time I was using this press with sublimation. So I crossed my fingers and I only did one coaster at a time so that if this didn't turn out, I wouldn't ruin a whole pile of coasters. I also layered 2 layers of butcher paper on top of the coaster to make sure none of the ink transferred from the sublimation paper and onto my press. I really didn't want to ruin my new press. When the countdown finished, I opened up my press, and the paper I find cools really fast, but the ceramic coaster really retains heat, so it is really hot. And I started to use my heat gloves, but noticed sometimes some of the pink grip things on the heat gloves, that pink actually transfers onto the coaster. So you may just want to let it cool before you start touching it. I was a little impatient, so I used my fingers to pick away the paper, trying not to touch the coaster itself. And I was pleasantly surprised, and I just love how this coaster turned out. And I was so happy with it, I decided to go ahead and make 3 more coasters. This time I did all 3 of them at once. I just love the way these coasters turned out. I'm so happy with them, and I think I'm gonna take out my HTVRONT tumbler press and make some mugs to go with the coasters. Overall, I absolutely love this press. It has all the features that you could possibly need. It's so easy to use and is definitely going to be my new go-to press. So Press number 1, I think, is gonna go in hiding, and press number 2 is now going to be sitting behind me. So if you're in the market for a new heat press, definitely consider this one. I'll leave a link for this product below in the description, and I hope to see you on more crafting adventures.